Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to the first kind of recent reads on Sunday in the new year 2024, which is not new anymore because it's 2 weeks old already. Two public service announcements before we begin. The first is I will keep the recent reads on Sunday. I do want to change a little bit what I talk about, in the sense that I want to really focus, as the title said, on the recent reads. So in other words, the books that I've finished. Over the course of the years, it was almost half and half, like books I finished and books I'm currently reading, which in the end I thought is a lot of repetition, because if I talk about the books that I'm currently reading like twice, and then again when I'm finished and wrapping it up, it's kind of might be a bit boring, for you especially. And it gives me also a little bit more time not to have the videos longer than the regular, like sort of 18 minutes, but still talk a good bit of the books that I've finished. So that's the first public service announcement. The second public service announcement is that I wanted to remind everybody that in January, at least the people who want to read with me, the 6 classics that I picked for 2024, I will leave a list with all the 6 titles down below and the schedule. Excuse me. But for January, and it's always 2 months, but for January and February, we'll read Ida B. Wells' The Light of Truth, Writings of an Anti-Lynching Crusader. It's quite a big book. It's over 500 pages. So if you want to join in, now is still time to acquire the book from the library or by any other means and maybe start reading. And we will wrapping this up end of February. And the second reminder is for the 1001 books I want to read book club that I'm doing together with Sandy. I'm a co-host this year for Sandy's book club. She always picks 10 books from her list, and this time from our list, to read along. So January there is no book, but in February we will read Madame de Lafayette, the Princess de Cleves, translated. This edition is a new translation by Terence Cave, but you can, of course, if you want to read along, choose any other translation or the French original, if your French is good enough. So this book will be our February pick, and if you want to read along, it's not that long, but maybe you have to acquire the book, and you still have now 2 weeks left in January to acquire the books. And there will also be a list down below with all the titles and the month we read them in. And we will wrap this book up also end of February. Okay, 3.5 minutes public service announcement. Let's get into the books. And it's the first books that I have finished in 2024. And my first read, as you know, I always pre-pick in December the first book to read on the 1st of January. And it's always a graphic novel, because I hardly ever read graphic novels. And also a graphic novel is something you can most likely finish in a day. So on January 1st, I read this. Can you see the author? Elisa Macellari, Kusama, translated from the Italian. Yeah, I forgot the translator. I'm really sorry. Translated by Edward Forts. So this is about the artist. You can see a picture of her, Yayoi Kusama, and she's a Japanese artist. She's still a contemporary artist. She's still alive. She's in her 90s now, I think, and I absolutely love her work. She has this kind of polka dot theme going on, very colorful, these bright colors, red and yellow, and there is a theme behind it. I mean, it's not just, a little child drawing dots, at least for me, it's not. So I really love her work. And this is called a graphic novel, but it's a biography of her life. She had quite a difficult youth, her upbringing. I mean, not in poverty or anything, but she was not allowed to become an artist. Her parents and her mother in particular had really very different thoughts about her future, and it took her a while. She then, after 7 years of struggle, she was able to go to art school, to go to the US. She was made quite a splash there. At the time, Andy Warhol was a splash. But she always struggled with her mental health. And when she went back to Japan, I think in her early 30s or something, she checked herself in voluntarily into a mental health institution. And she has lived in that institution ever since. She goes every day to her studio to paint. And I mean, she's not imprisoned herself, but she has lived under the supervision of the doctors in this mental institution ever since, because she feels that's a way of giving her enough safety also to paint. I really enjoyed this one. It's a special interest book. If you're not interested in this artist, this is not a book you will pick up. But if you are, or if you might be, this is a really, really nicely told and very beautifully drawn biography of this extraordinary woman. So it was a really good start of the reading year. And then a little less successful was my let's do this the other way around. My first nonfiction was a book that had been on my list for a long, long time, and that is Joanna Scott's Hotbed, Bohemian Greenwich Village and the Secret Club That Sparked Modern Feminism. This is a book about, the blurb says, on a Saturday afternoon in New York City in 1912, a group of women crowded around the wooden tables of a downtown restaurant, fired by the urgency of changing the world. That sounds already good, doesn't it? It was the first meeting of the so-called heterodoxy, a secret club of unruly women. And, they talked about politics and feminism, and I thought that sounded really good. The book is not really about that, because I expected a book about the group, about their gatherings, what they talked about, what they achieved or not, or what their goals was. And this is not really the book. The book is much more about the individual women who became part of this club. So, and it's a good book. But I went in with wrong expectations, which is never good. And it's never the book's fault. It's either my fault or the publisher's fault for, not really telling me what the book is about. But it should have said that this is much more about Greenwich Village, indeed, the hotbed, the circumstances. It doesn't start in 1912. It starts earlier, when a couple of women who were part of this club, in the end, came from very different activist backgrounds, whether it's labor activism or whether it's feminism or, whether it's for the vote. So it's much more a portrayal of the time in New York City, and is in particular, how Greenwich Village kind of fueled this type of activism, and about various women. And each chapter is about a different woman or a couple of different women who were activists together. And it's really interesting, quite detailed. So again, like with the Kusama book, you really need an interest in this particular topic. Otherwise, you find the book boring. But don't go into the book thinking it is about the group as such. There is, of course, you will learn about who was member of the group and things like that. But it's not focusing on group activities. It's focusing on the individual women. But it was still a really good read. The second nonfiction that I read was less successful. And again, I don't think it was the book's fault. This time it was more my fault that the book had a special interest focus that was just not my special interest focus. And that book was Mother Tongue by Jenny Nuttall, I think. And this one was published last year. I think towards the beginning of the year, and it says in the subtitle, "The Surprising History of Women's Words." And I'm, as you know, if you follow my channel, I'm really into the whole language thing, linguistics and how language started. And I read a book last year, The First Words, and I read a book earlier, like 2 years ago, The First Signs, about, cave drawings. So it is something that I really, I'm having an itch here. I'm sorry. The language is something that I'm interested in. However, and certainly when it comes to a kind of a feminist vantage point for the book. However, this is Nuttall is an academic who has been teaching and researching medieval literature at the University of Oxford. And repeat and emphasize the word medieval. So this book is very heavily focusing on medieval English. Second focus, medieval English, and explaining how words developed, where the word uterus comes from, for instance, or something like that. And that was, for me, only partly interesting, I have to admit. So if you are fascinated by the English language in particular, the medieval English language, then I think this book might interest you. But for me, the very, very detailed history of certain words, it's organized, female anatomy, then the menstrual words, then about sex, about the womb. So that part was what drew me in, but then each chapter is a very, very detailed history of the medieval English words that were used and are now still used or differently used or are out of use. And that just didn't grab me. So yeah, it was not a real successful, a real successful read for me, unfortunately. And then my first fiction read of the month, I was heavy into nonfiction for some reason in the first 2 weeks of January, and I still am, even though I'm now reading 2 or 3 novels. But my first fiction read was also a really successful pick, and that was Susan Abulava, Mornings in Jenin, which was published, I think, 2016, and it was her debut novel. Susan Abulava is an American-Palestinian author. Her parents were refugees in 1967, and I think she was born 1968 or something. But don't hold me to it. I'm ill-prepared as usual. Some things never change, not even in the new year. And I also decided not to look up constantly things while I'm talking to you. I think that's distracting. The light change, but also me looking up things. If I forgot the date of the publication, so be it. I mean, I can always try to look that up, which is 2010. So there we go. Anyway, so I'm, if you watched my goals and plans video for 2024. I'm still interested in reading more from the global south, as I call it, and with a particular focus on Palestinian authors. There is not that much that I can acquire from people actually still living there. So most of the authors that I picked, like Susan Abuelava, are either refugees themselves or children of refugees. So it's the Palestinian origin is for me more important than where they live at the moment. And I still count it as Palestinian authors. And I read another book by Susan Abuelava last year, Against the Lovelessness of the World, which I really liked, but I thought this one, which was her debut novel, was just excellent. It has, as a theme, it's the history of a family again, like many books by Palestinian authors, they try to give you a feel for the history of the Palestinian people, and a family is always, a good kind of entry point. So we have this, can you see this? This family starting in the 1940s, so before what the Palestinian people call the catastrophe in 1948, when more than 700,000 people were displaced, most of them forcefully. And it follows various people in that family. And what I really liked about the book until I think 2002, yes, 2002. So it's quite long. It's 50 years of family history, 3 generations, almost 4. What I really appreciated about the book is, first of all, it does have. It gives you also information, also almost essay-style information, short paragraphs when one of the protagonists thinks about the actual events. And I think that's helpful because I am not that familiar with every aspect of history in the Middle East. So it was helpful for me that I got the anchor, the historical anchor, without it feeling like an info dump. On the other hand, people feel real, and it's a heartbreaking story, of course, with people who don't feel like they are just the cardboard figures in order to explain history to me. They feel real, and they are morally nuanced, not all good, not all bad. And in the end, it's up to me as a reader to make up my mind about the moral issues. I'm just presented with people who make moral choices, and it's explained to me from within the character why they make certain choices, so it makes sense. But whether I agree with their choices, it's up to me. So the author doesn't go around finger wagging, telling me this is good, this is bad. No. And I really appreciate that. Certainly when it comes to a topic like this. So this was a fantastic read. It was my first 5-star read of the year. There you go. And then I just want to look at what is coming up. Like I said, don't want to make these videos overly long. It's already 19 minutes because of the public service announcement. I think the next book that I will wrap up is this, To the Bright Edge of the World by Eowyn Ivey, about an expedition into Alaska by American soldiers, not in military, but they were soldiers in the late 19th century. And I think I'm going to pick up this book as my next Non-fiction read. So there you go. Under 20 minutes, I achieved it. The first books of 2024. Bit of a mixed bag, but enough really, really good reads to make it the first 2 weeks a success. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me. Please leave a comment. I'm always looking forward to that, and I will talk to you all soon in the next one.